Billionaire dad watches black waitress help his disabled son do a dance move, then changes her life forever. The silence that settled over the city's most chic restaurant was so thick that it seemed to have weight. Conversations stopped. Cutlery was suspended in the air and dozens of eyes were fixed on the small space between the tables. Leo Montero, 10 years old, was visibly shaking. His legs, encased in metal braces, wobbled as he reached out to Diane Silva, the restaurant's only black waitress. The live piano had just started a soft melody, and the boy's impulse to ask someone to dance came without warning. "Sir, control your son." Manager Bastos's harsh voice cut through the silence. "This is inappropriate. This is not a dance hall. Our employees are not here to entertain children." Ricardo Montero, owner of Montero Investimentos, and one of the richest men in the country, swallowed hard. It was the first time he had taken Leo out to dinner in public since the accident that left his legs partially paralyzed 2 years earlier. Mistake he would not repeat. "Leo, sit down." The order came softly but firmly. Diane remained still, her gaze alternating between the manager, the billionaire, and the boy, whose hand was still hovering in the air. In her 5 years working there, she had learned to be invisible, especially to clients like Montero. "Mr. Bastos, I am leaving. My shift is over." Her voice was calm as she took off her apron and placed it on the tray. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled at Leo and took his hand. "I cannot dance in an apron." Ricardo stood up abruptly. "What do you think you are doing?" Diane held his gaze. "I am accepting an invitation, sir. Before anyone else does anything, I will not be able to dance." Could interfere. Leo took a hesitant step forward. His foot dragged painfully on the floor and the metal of his braces creaked. But Diane didn't try to guide him or hurry him. She simply adjusted her own pace to his. "Are you going to get fired tomorrow?" "Absolutely," a woman at the next table whispered. Ricardo watched, transfixed. A sudden memory struck him. Elisa, his late wife, dancing with Leo in the living room. "It's not about perfection," she had said. "It's about connection." Diane followed Leo's clumsy steps. Something in the boy's eyes changed. Fear gave way to total focus. Shame, shy pride. For the first time since the accident, he wasn't being guided, helped, or corrected. He was leading. "Mr. Montero?" The manager's voice interrupted his thoughts. "I can assure you that this will never happen again. She will be properly disciplined." Ricardo didn't answer. The entire restaurant seemed to be waiting for his reaction. After all, a man like him could end anyone's career with a single word. Employees stopped what they were doing. Other customers watched with morbid curiosity. Leo's smile, however, was the only sound echoing in his head. Diane led the boy back to the table after 3 dance steps. "Thank you for inviting me," she said formally, as if speaking to an adult. "It was an honor." When she turned to leave, Ricardo stopped her. "Wait." His voice sounded different, almost unrecognizable to himself. "What's your full name?" "Diane Silva, sir." Ricardo nodded slowly. Diane Silva repeated as if memorizing it. Then he took a card from inside his jacket and handed it to her. My office. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. The entire restaurant held its breath. Diane accepted the card without showing emotion, but her hand shook a little. Father, Leo called as she walked away. Why did you do that? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Ricardo looked at his son and, for a brief moment, saw not just the child Elisa had left in his care, but a complete human being whose wants and needs he had systematically ignored for 2 years. Dinner continued in awkward silence. No one noticed the look Diane gave her before she left, not one of fear or resignation, but of a calm determination that contrasted with the storm brewing in Ricardo Montero's eyes. If this story of dignity and transformation is already touching your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel to follow how a simple gesture of respect can trigger a silent revolution, capable of transforming lives forever. The lobby of Torre Montero shone with its glass and marble walls, reflecting the morning sunlight. Diane Silva felt immediately out of place. In her best outfit, a navy blue skirt, and a white blouse bought on sale, the people who passed by her were wearing clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Don Silva. To see Mr. Montero, she told the receptionist, who gave her a cold look before making a call. 18th floor. Mrs. Valeria will be with you. In the elevator. Diane took a deep breath, clutching her battered purse to her chest. It wasn't fear she felt, it was a calm determination, coming from someone who had faced worse, much worse. Mrs. Valeria was a woman in her 40s, with a piercing gaze and impeccable posture. Mr. Montero is on a conference call. Please come with me. As she walked through the mirrored hallways, Diane felt the curious glances of the employees. Black woman being escorted through the director's offices was a rare enough occurrence to cause speculation. He had you fired, didn't he, Mrs. Valeria? She asked, suddenly when they were alone in a waiting room. It happens. Powerful clients call and people like you lose their jobs. People like me, you know what I mean. Mrs. Valeria adjusted her glasses. Employees who don't know their place. Diane smiled awkwardly. And where exactly would that place be? Before Valeria could answer, her phone rang. He'll see you now. Ricardo Montero's office took up half the floor. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city looked like a distant playground. The man stood still, looking out over the metropolis, as if it were his own private property. Mr. Montero. Diane greeted him formally. Ricardo turned his face away, a mask of rehearsed control. Mrs. Silva, thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair. Please. The silence that followed was calculated. A tactic Diane recognized immediately was the kind of silence designed to make nervous people talk too much, to incriminate themselves. Do you have any training? Ricardo finally asked. As she said, studies, college. Diane kept her gaze steady. Bachelor's degree in child development from USP. Incomplete master's degree in special education. Something flashed on Ricardo's face. Surprise, perhaps. And you work as a waitress? I have 3 jobs, actually. The restaurant, a bookstore on the weekends, and as a tutor when I get students. Ricardo moved to her desk, picking up a folder. I did some research on you, Mrs. Silva. I wanted to understand who the person was. He hesitated, danced with my son, opened the folder revealing printed photos of a community center. Free steps. You founded this 6 years ago. Diane sat up straight in her chair. Co-founded a dance program for children with physical disabilities with my sister Zara. Ricardo leafed through some documents that are now about to close due to lack of funds. Diane showed no surprise. Of course he would find out all this in less than 24 hours. I didn't come here to ask you for money, Mr. Montero. So why did you come? Because you invited me. Ricardo laughed softly. A happy sound. Fair enough. He stood up again. Restless. I want you to work for me. Diane blinked in genuine surprise as a waitress in her house. Ricardo's face hardened as a therapeutic companion for Leo. His son's name seemed difficult for him. Pronounce. Diane noticed her eyes drift momentarily to a photo. On the table, a smiling woman holding a baby. I have the best specialists in the country. Ricardo continued, physical therapists, neurologists, psychologists. But what did you do yesterday? He paused, as if the words betrayed him. It was just a dance, Mr. Montero. It was the first time I'd seen him smile since the accident. The admission was painful. I don't want a dancer for my son. I want someone who can do what you did. Follow, not lead. Diane studied the man in front of her. Beneath the facade of power and control, she saw what others might not. A desperate, lost father. Can pay you 5 times what you earn now. Diane stood up. No. Ricardo looked shocked, like someone unaccustomed to hearing that word. I don't work for people who see only my color or my social class before they see my competence, she explained calmly. And I definitely don't work for people who try to buy solutions to emotional problems. Ricardo's face flushed. You're turning down an offer that would solve your financial problems. Out of pride, out of dignity, Diane corrected. And why does your son deserve more than someone hired to pretend to care? She walked to the door, then stopped. Leo doesn't need any more experts. He needs space to lead his own life. And you know my son? No, Diane agreed, but I know people like him. People whose physical limitations are nothing compared to the invisible cages we build around them. Took a card from her purse and placed it on the table. Free steps. Classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 p.m. If you want to bring Leo, the first class is free. On her way out, Diane passed Valeria, who had obviously been listening behind the door. Did you just turn down an offer from Ricardo Montero? She whispered, incredulous. Are you crazy? Diane smiled. Maybe, but I'd rather be crazy than be property. The following Wednesday, Diane was in the reception area of the community center when Zara, her sister and co-founder of the project, came running. There's a fancy imported car parked outside, she whispered nervously, adjusting her hijab. And you won't believe who's inside. Through the window, Diane saw the luxurious car. Leo was in the back seat, looking anxiously out the window. Ricardo remained in the driver's seat, his hands still on the steering wheel, as if he was fighting an internal battle. He won't come in, Zara predicted. Men like him don't come to places like this. Diane smiled, remembering the look in Leo's eyes. During those brief moments of dancing, don't underestimate the power of a determined child. As they watched, the car door opened. Leo walked out slowly, adjusting his equipment. Then, to everyone's surprise, Ricardo also left. The billionaire looked out of place in his casual pants and sweater, an obvious attempt to dress less formally but still screamed, "Privilege! I told you he would come." Diane, she muttered more to herself. Zara stared at her. "What did you do?" Diane didn't answer, but her eyes shone with a secret that not even her sister fully knew. In his small apartment in a simple neighborhood in the East Zone, hidden under the bed, there was a notebook full of notes about children like Leo and men like Ricardo Montero. Years of observation, research, and a plan that had started with a simple acceptance of an invitation to dance. What Ricardo Montero didn't know, what he couldn't imagine in his world of glass towers and infinite bank accounts, was that Diane Silva wasn't just a waitress who had agreed to dance with his son. She was a woman on a mission, and her empire of isolation and privilege was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The simple truth is that some of life's greatest lessons cannot be bought, they must be lived. Passos Livres operated in an old community warehouse. Handmade posters decorated the walls with phrases like, "Your pace, your rules, and every move counts." When Ricardo and Leo entered, children with different types of mobility devices were practicing free movements to the sound of a light beat. Mr. Montero. Diane approached, wearing simple clothes with the program's logo. "Welcome." Leo the first watched the children in wonder. A girl in a wheelchair spun in precise circles, while a boy with a prosthetic leg created a sequence of steps. "Looks chaotic," Ricardo commented, visibly uncomfortable. "There is structure," Diane replied. "It's just not the one you recognize." She turned to Leo. "Want to participate?" The boy nodded enthusiastically, but looked at his father hesitantly. "Go ahead," Ricardo said tensely. "I'll be right here." As Diane guided Leo to the group, Zara approached Ricardo and offered him a chair. "The first day is always the hardest," she commented. "For the parents, not for the children." "This isn't therapy," Ricardo argued. "I hired the best rehabilitation specialists." "And how has that worked for Leo?" Zara asked gently. The studio door opened. An elderly lady entered, leaning on an ornate cane. She had gray hair in elegant braids and an imposing presence. "Dr. Eliana Matos," Zara whispered. "Neuroscientist specializing in brain plasticity, retired from USP." The woman greeted several children before noticing Ricardo. "Mr. Montero, you've rejected my research proposal 3 times in the last 2 years." "Dr. Matos, I didn't expect to see you here. I oversee the research program," she explained. "We're studying how non-directive approaches to movement affect neural reconfiguration in children with motor challenges." "Research?" Ricardo frowned. "I thought this was just a community dance class." Diane went back, leaving Leo exploring movement with another child. "Passos Livres is a pilot motor rehabilitation program based on the theory of movement autonomy," she explained. We integrate adaptive dance with neuroscientific principles. Why do you work as a waitress if you lead a research program? Why do and we have adequate funding yet? And why did people like you reject us 3 times? The penny dropped. You were Dr. Motto's assistant on the proposals. Co-author. Dr. Motto's. Corrected. Diane has an incomplete master's degree because she had to drop out of college to take care of her sister, but her theoretical work is groundbreaking. Did you know who I was at the restaurant? Ricardo concluded. From the moment when you came in, Diane confirmed. And when Leo got up to dance, she recognized the opportunity to show, not tell. Was the dance staged? Absolutely not. Leo chose to stand. I chose to follow. A group of reporters entered the studio. Ricardo immediately tensed. What is this? Part 2 of the plan. Diane smiled slightly. Zara showed Ricardo a recently published article. Revolutionary methodology for motor rehabilitation. Those promising results. We published our first results today, Dr. Mottos explained, and invited the press. You used my son for a PR stunt. Ricardo's voice was pure ice. Diane led him to a side room where photos of dozens of children adorned the walls, each with handwritten progress statistics. On the far wall was an empty frame. What is that? He asked. Our future, the complete rehabilitation center we could build if we had the resources. 500 children a year instead of 50. You orchestrated all of this, Ricardo muttered. The dance, the meeting, bringing me here on press day. I saw an opportunity and took it. 4 months ago, when you canceled our meeting without reading the proposal, I promised myself I would find a way. Diane. Zara interrupted. Is it Leo? They ran back. Leo was in the center of the room, surrounded by other children. Someone had turned off the music and everyone watched in silence. The boy had removed one of his devices and was trying to balance himself on just one support. Leo. Ricardo advanced, but Diane stopped him. Wait, she whispered. Please note. Leo took a deep breath and concentrated. Then, to everyone's astonishment, especially his father's, he took a full step without full support. It was small, shaky, but entirely his. The children cheered, camera arrows fired. Richard's face, usually composed and unreadable, was now exposed, unshed tears shining in his eyes. That's why we created free steps, Diane said softly. It's not about perfect steps, it's about taking the first steps on your own. Ricardo saw his son not as a problem to be managed but as a complete person discovering his own strength. This could have been done without manipulating me, he finally said. It could have been if you had answered our calls or read our proposals 3 times. The reporters noticed. Ricardo. A buzz grew as Leo, oblivious to everyone, continued, practicing his new step with an expression of pure concentration. Ricardo. Montero was cornered. He was faced with 2 options: to withdraw in anger, confirming to the press his reputation as cold and calculating, or to embrace the moment his son had created. Between the power he had always wielded and the freedom his son needed, Ricardo found himself in unknown territory, where neither his money nor his influence defined the next step. the man who controlled every aspect of her life now faced a choice no amount of wealth could buy. His gaze alternated between his smiling son and the reporters waiting for his reaction. Humility was not a virtue in his vocabulary, but seeing the transformation on Leo's face, something inside him began to break. The orchestra of power and privilege he was used to was now playing a different tune, and he had to decide whether he would continue conducting or learn to follow. Ricardo Montero faced the reporters who were waiting for his reaction. Her son had just taken a step on his own in front of the cameras, and Diane Silva had skillfully guided him to this impossible moment. Mr. Montero, a reporter, approached. Could you comment on your presence at Pasos Livres today? Is it true that your foundation rejected funding for this program 3 times? Ricardo looked at Leo, who was still practicing his new step, oblivious to the political attention. Then, to everyone's surprise, especially Diane's, he smiled. Do you know what's hardest for someone in my position? Ricardo addressed the reporter, but spoke loudly, enough for everyone to hear. Admit when we are wrong. Shocked silence filled the room. The Montero Foundation is pleased to announce its commitment to fully fund Pasos Livres for the next 5 years and to build a permanent rehabilitation center based on the methodology developed by Dr. Matos and Sonora Silva. Camera flashes went off. Zara let out a cry of surprise at one condition, he added, seeing Diane tense up, that Mrs. Silva maintains full autonomy over the program and its methodology without corporate interference. 3 months later, Troers cleared the land for the new Pasos Livres Rehabilitation Center. The project was not the most luxurious that the Montero Foundation had ever funded, but it was the most innovative, with each space designed with direct input from the children and their families. Diane often supervised construction, but never alone. Leo showed up regularly, sometimes bringing other children with him. And to the team's continued surprise, Ricardo Montero also appeared, silently observing the progress. I never thought you'd actually show up to board meetings, Diane commented one afternoon as they reviewed the blueprints. I never thought I'd have to study neuroplasticity at 50, Ricardo replied, rubbing his eyes. Tired. In front of you, a scientific article, marked with post-its. But here we are. Diane looked at the man curiously. Is this part of your public penance, or do you really care? Leo asked to have the second device removed last week. I know. He told me. His previous physical therapist said this would be impossible for at least 2 years. Diane smiled. But you fired her, remember? Because I told her she was wrong, and she was. Diane pointed to a photo of Leo, balancing with just one crutch. He is progressing faster than any traditional medical prediction. Why did you never accept my apology? Ricardo asked suddenly. Why did you never apologize? Did you redirect resources, change policies, fund our program? This is not an apology, it is compensation. Ricardo nodded slowly. Fair enough. Again. At the opening ceremony, 6 months later, the contrast with that night at the restaurant could not have been greater. The huge adapted space was full of children with different types of mobility devices, all moving freely. In the center of the main hall, Leo, now wearing only a light brace on his left leg, led a short choreographed routine, with 3 other children. His movements were still limited, but they flowed with a confidence no doctor had anticipated. Ricardo watched from a distance, without interfering. "He doesn't need you to hold him anymore," Diane said, approaching silently. "No," Ricardo agreed, "but he still needs me to be around." Crucial difference. Ricardo turned to face her. "Thank you," he said, "simply for exactly what he taught me to do next." A reporter approached. "Mr. Montero, how do you feel seeing your son's progress?" Ricardo looked at Leo, who was now helping a younger girl find her balance. Proud, not of what he overcame, but of what he created for others. "And what was the biggest lesson you learned on this journey?" Ricardo Montero, the man who was once known only for his financial empire, looked straight into the camera that true leaders are not those who guide others down the path they believe is right, but those who have the courage to follow when someone shows them a better way. Year later, the Pasos Livres program expanded to 3 new cities. Diane received the award for innovation in pediatric rehabilitation, and her methodology began to be implemented in hospitals across the country. Leo, now using only a light cane on tough days, enrolled in regular school and became a youth spokesperson for the program, inspiring other children to find their own rhythm. And Ricardo learned the hardest and most valuable lesson of all, that true power lies not in controlling every move, but in knowing when it is time to take a step back and let others lead the way. In a world where powerful people rarely change their perspectives and where those without power often remain in the shadows, the story of Ricardo, Diane, and Leo reminds us that true transformation occurs when we cross the invisible boundaries that separate us, when a billionaire learns from a waitress, when a father follows in his son's footsteps. If this story about how a simple gesture of dignity changed lives forever touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to our channel, because we believe that the most profound revolutions do not begin with great manifestos or billion-dollar fortunes. They begin when someone has the courage to take an authentic first step.